the Excel functions that we are going to cover today, the datetime functions, these are the 16 functions. Today, now, days, data diff, blah, blah, blah. I'll cover all of this. So like I said, the earlier plan was to have 4 days, but now it'll take 5 days. And on the 5th day, we will do the 7 logical functions. We will not do that today. Okay, so I hope everybody has downloaded the workbook. Please open it. So once you open the Excel workbook, this is the first sheet where it shows you the name of all the functions that we are going to cover. Before we work with dates, we need to understand how Excel handles date and times. This is very important, guys. You need to understand how Excel stores date and time. The dates that you will see in this workbook, they correspond to English India date format, which is date, month, and then year. So if you look at the bottom screen, you will notice here the date format is 20th February 2023, which is the date, then the month, and then the year. Now, if you want to check what is the format that your PC has, then click on the start button. So this is the start button. If you're using Windows 11, it will look something like this. If you don't see control panel, type control panel here. Otherwise, I have the icon. Click on control panel. Next, click on clock and region. Then now I'm explaining this because this is very important. People do not know about this and then they get confused how Excel works with dates. So this is very important. Go to the region section. Okay. In the region dialog box, you can see the format here is English India. This is for me. It could be different for you. Okay. My short date format is date, then the month, and then the year. My long format is date, month, and year, but obviously MM. Here we had MM. And there are many other formats. So whenever you're working in an Excel system, always be careful of what the format is. And this, remember guys, I will explain why it is important when we are working with the function called date value, which is on the 16th row here. So remember this, I will mention this particular part at that moment when we are covering this function. Okay, now let me cancel this. I'll close this and let's go to sheet 2. In sheet 2, in cell C1, we have a date which is 02/01/23. 2023. Now tell me something. If you did not know the date format of what your system is, would you be able to look at this and tell me whether it is 2nd of Jan 2023 or 1st of Feb 2023? How would you know that? This is why you have to know what your Excel, your system settings are. You have to be very careful, otherwise you will get incorrect results. You may see different kind of formats of dates and times in Microsoft Excel, but for Microsoft Excel, a date ultimately is just a number. Okay, so now what is that number? Now, if you noticed, let's take an example. Okay, so before I do that, let me explain one thing. What Excel does is it converts the, let me switch this off one moment. Right. So what Excel does is it converts the date and time to a positive serial number, and that's how it stores it. So if you noticed, I just used the word positive because Excel does not consider negative numbers as dates. So 0 is nothing but a fictitious date of January 0, 1900, or on a 1904 based Excel system. Okay, let me come to this. Now, if you go to, let's type here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Do you know this is how Excel stores the dates? So 0 is the first date, which is 0 Jan 1900. Okay, and then the next serial number is 1. The number 1 is nothing but 1st of January 1900. And serial number 2 is 2nd of January 1900, and so on. So today's date, which is 20th of February 2023, can be converted to a number. We will see that in a moment. So what I will do is first, I will type, which I've already done here. Okay, now let me change the format. So I'll right click on this and I'll click on format cells. Okay, now the format which I have done here is, I will change it to date. Yeah, once I do change it to date and I click on OK, see, so the first date is 0 Jan 1900, 1st Jan 1900, and so on. This is how Excel stores the date. So let me press Control Z. So this is the serial number, and this is how Excel shows you the date. But at the back end, it stores as number. Now let's try the reverse. What I will do is I will enter today's date in a cell, and then I will format the cell as number. Let's see what number do we get. Okay, so I'm going to put today's date here, which is 20/02/2023. So this is today's date. Now let's try the reverse. Here we converted the number to date. Here we'll change the date to number. So format cells, number, remove the decimals, and click on OK. So the date that Excel stores today's date as 44,977, which means today's date is 44,977 days from the 1st of Jan 1900. This is how, like I said, Excel stores the number. And just because Excel uses serial numbers to store dates and times, it becomes very easy to use these in formulas. So if you want to find the difference between two dates, all you have to do is just subtract one date from the other. So what you're doing ultimately is subtracting one number from the other, as simple as that. Now, Excel supports any dates which start from the 1st of Jan 1900 up till 31st of December 9999. So Excel has got it covered till that year. Don't worry about that. The serial number for 31st December 9999 is 29,58,465. So if you type 31st December 999 and convert it to number like the way I did it, you will get that. Okay. Now you may think, if the date starts from 1st of Jan 1900, then why do we have 0? I mean, 0 is no date. Why do we have 0 1900? Okay, I'll come to this later when I'm explaining how Excel works with time. I'll come to that section later on. First, let's understand the Excel date system that I was talking about. Now, Excel supports two kinds of date systems. The first date system is 1900 date system, and the other is 1904. So 1900 and 1904. These are the years. So here you can see it is 1900 date system. By default, Excel uses 1900 date system. Now, how do I check what date system does Excel have? Okay, so click on File, click on Options, and then go to the Advanced panel. Okay, once you're in the Advanced panel in the Excel Options dialog box, scroll down to the section which says when calculating the workbook. Just go down, go down, go down. When calculating the workbook, here it is. Here do you see use 1904 date system? If you click on this, then Excel will use the 1904 date system. Now, what will happen? What's the difference? When you click on 1904 date system, the first date becomes 1st of January 1904. In case it is 1900, the first date is 1st of January 1900. As simple as that. Okay. So remember that the default is 1900. My advice to you is do not use 1904 date system. And why would I say that? Because almost everyone uses the 1900 date system. And if you are using a 1904 date system, and if you, let's say, link it to a 1900 date system Excel file, then you will get incorrect results. So if you share that file with somebody else, then that person will get incorrect results. There's one more difference between the 1900 date system and the 1904 date system. The 1904 date system allows you to display negative values, whereas 1900 date system doesn't allow that. So in the beginning, I said Excel stores the number as positive numbers and not negative numbers. Yeah, so Excel cannot handle negative numbers. But if you choose 1904, then Excel can handle negative numbers. For example, if you subtract 2 p.m. from 1 p.m., you will get an error in the 1900 date system because 2 is greater than 1. So the if I do 1 minus 2, the answer should be minus 1, right? But Excel can't handle that when it comes to time or date. But in 1904, you will get -1, which is a negative of 1 hour. Okay. So before we delve into formulas, one last thing that we will try and understand is how Excel stores time. The reason why I'm sharing this information with you is once we get into the formulas, you will realize how Excel works with date and time. Okay. Now, I just mentioned Excel stores dates and times as serial numbers, but what is special about time? I mean, what does it do in case of time? What Excel does is it extends the serial number to include the decimals. So if I change this number 44977 to 44977.5, if I do that, obviously it's rounded off, but let me show the decimals here. So this is the number. Then it means that it is 20th of Feb 2023, 12 p.m. We already saw that 44977 is today's date. The 0.5 indicates half of the day. So consider 1 as the full day. So 0.5 is half. So that's half of the day, which is 12 p.m. in the afternoon. Okay, so let's check if this is true. All you have to do is right click on it, format cells, click on custom, and let's type dd-mm-yyyy hh-mm am pm. Okay, if I click on OK, you will see that that number got converted to date and it's showing us 12 p.m. exactly like I mentioned. When you're working with date and time, the first thing that comes to your mind is current date and current time. Okay, so now how can I get the current date and current time in the cell without typing the date and time? Usually what we do is we just type 20/2/23. But if I don't want to do that, how can we enter the current date? How can we get the current date and the current time in the cell without typing it? So the first function that we will cover is today. So if you go back here, that's the first function we'll cover today. So now we have begun with the functions. We will understand all these functions. The today function returns the current date. It does not accept any arguments. Okay, so let's enter the formula in cell C3 is equal to today. And if you press the bracket, if you type the bracket, you will notice that it does not accept any arguments. So let's close this and let's press the enter key. And we get the date. Yep. So if you remember in my previous video, I spoke about the calculation mode in Excel, which is if you go to Formulas tab, this is the calculation options. Currently, it is set to automatic. Yeah. If the calculation mode is set as automatic, and if the cell value changes the value from, let's say, okay, what happens is, let's say today is 2023 and we are at 11:59 p.m. Okay, let's say right now it is not 11:59, but let's say it is 11:59. So you're working for a minute and then you make any change in the cell. And if you press enter, this value will get updated to the next day, which is 21st of Feb 2023. So remember that this is also a volatile function which automatically updates it. So the function will continually update each time the worksheet is opened or recalculated. Now, what if I want to, let's say, enter today's date, but I do not want it to get updated ever again? So like I said, after 11:59, if the date changes and if I make any change in the cell, this date will change. Yeah, but if I don't want the date to change, how can I enter the current date without typing it? So I'm going to share a shortcut key with you. The shortcut key is the control and the semicolon. So if I delete this, if you press the control key and then the semicolon, you'll get today's date. I hope you guys are. As I mentioned, that Excel stores dates as serial numbers. So you can actually perform basic calculations on this date. For example, if I want to find 10 days from this date, which is 22/2023, then how do I do it? It's as simple as that. You can say equal to this plus 10, and you'll get the date. If I put today here, it'll still work. See, if I double click on it, you'll notice C3 is highlighted. So it is picking up value from there and it is adding 10 to it. Like I said here, if you remember, Excel stores the numbers as serial numbers, the dates as serial numbers. All you have to do is just add 10 to it and it'll take 10 days. Pretty simple. Okay, now moving on to the next function, which is now. Now, what does now do? The now function returns the current date along with the current time. Okay, again, this function does not accept any arguments. Okay, so if I type equal to now, and if I press the start bracket, if I type the start bracket, you will notice it does not accept any arguments. So let's close that and let's press the enter key. And I get the date and I get the time as well. The value written by now will also continually update each time the worksheet is updated. When I pressed the formula and I pressed enter, it was 20:25. Right now the time is 20:26. So if I double click on any cell and I press enter, you will notice that the time just got updated. Just like we had a shortcut key for today, similarly, we have a shortcut key for time. Okay, so I'm going to delete this. So, okay, now listen carefully. The shortcut key is Control, Shift, and colon. For today, it was Control and semicolon. For this, it is Control, Shift, and colon. So if I press Control, Shift, and colon, I'll get the time. There's no date part in that, see, just the time. And obviously, when the cell changes, this will not get updated. Okay. Now, just like you did basic calculations with today function, you can also do the same with now function as well. So if you type here, remember what was 12 hours from now? It is 0.5. So if you type equal to now plus 0.5, what do you get? 12 hours from now, which is 21 Feb 2023 and 8 in the morning. So it added 12 hours to it. So remember that. This is how Excel works with dates and times. Moving on to the next function. That is how to calculate the age, whether it is your age or whether it is, let's say, the difference between dates. So as data analyst, you may be required to find the number of days or months or years between two dates. Okay, so let's move on to the next cell, which is date difference. Now, how can I find the date difference? I just mentioned to you that Excel stores it as numbers. So I can do this, right? Equal to end date minus start date. And I get 370. Right? Pretty simple. So the difference between these two dates is 370. Why? Because one is 2022 and the other is 2023. The year is different. Otherwise, you may get confused. Shouldn't it be 5 days? So there's a difference between the year. Right. So here we got the number of days, but this is not enough sometimes. Okay. I'll come to that in a moment. Okay. Now you can also use the days function to achieve this. Now moving on to the next function. I'll come to the other part, why this is insufficient, just doing a subtraction of this. I'll come to this in a moment. The next function that we'll cover is the days function. This function returns the number of days between two dates. The syntax is pretty simple. So if I type equal to days, start bracket, you will notice it is asking for an end date and a start date. Okay. Start date and end dates are two dates between which you want to know the number of days. Okay, so what I will do is I'll select the end date as this, and I'll press comma, and the start date as this. So if I close this and if I press enter, you will notice I get 370. So if you do a direct subtraction of cell addresses, or if you use the days function, you will get the same result. Okay, so this is another function to return the number of days between two dates. Now the question, what if I want to find the total number of months or years between these two dates? Because the method that we used here just returned the dates here as well. So how do we do that? I'm going to share an amazing Excel function with you. It's a hidden Excel function. When you type or if you click on the insert function, you'll not find that function. It is called dated if, DATEDIF. I'll write it here. Dated if. This is a hidden function. Now, why did I say hidden? Because if you start typing equal to date, you see dated if there? You'll not see it. That is why it is hidden. But this is a very important function. The syntax of this is, obviously, Excel will not tell you what the syntax is. The first argument it expects is a start date. Okay, so I'm going to select the start date, then comma. The second argument is the end date. I've selected this as well. There's a third argument which is called unit. Now, the time unit in which we want the information. So what I've done for you is I've created a small Excel range, a small table kind of thing here in Excel. It will tell you what the value of unit you can supply to this function. If you type Y, then it will give you difference in complete years. The function returns the number of complete years in the period. If you type M, then difference in complete months. If you type D, then difference in complete days. If you type MD, it calculates the difference between the days in the start date and end date. The month and years of the dates are ignored here, and so on. So if you look at the cell next to it, I want years. So I will type Y. And it gives me 1. So the difference between these two is 1 year. What if I want to find month? Copy this, paste it here, and then change this to M. So there are 12 months. Okay. And how do I find the dates? I can paste the same thing and change this to D. If you press enter, you will notice that you get 370, which is the same as these two. So remember, dated if will give you the dates, not only in terms of days, but in terms of years and months. Dated if is very important when you're trying to calculate age, let's say your age. So I will come to that also in a moment. Now, one important thing about dated if function is that while counting the difference of two dates, it also includes the weekends. So if you want to find, let's say, total working days excluding weekends, let's say Saturday and Sunday between the two dates, then you can't use dated if, because there's no argument where you can tell Excel that ignore the weekends. For this, we have another function called network days. So that's the next function we are going to cover, which is next network days. Okay, now let's use the same start date and the end date, and let's try and find out the networking days between these two dates. Okay, so let's start typing. Is equal to network days, start bracket. The syntax is pretty simple: start date, end date, and the holidays. I've already explained what start date and end date is in other functions. It's the same thing here as well. Okay, so start date is 20, comma, end date is this, comma. Now holidays, what is this holidays? So holidays, okay, we'll come to this in a moment. If I close this, holidays is an optional argument, because if you notice, it has square brackets around it. So if I close this and if I press the enter key, it tells me there are 265 net working days. It assumed that the weekends were to be removed. So we removed the weekends. That is why 370 and 265, these are two different figures. Right. Now let's try and understand the last argument, which is holidays. The holidays argument, it is a list of non-working days. So for example, besides the weekends, you also want to subtract a list of holidays. Every country, every state has different list of holidays. So you can also specify that. So you can supply a range. So I'm going to select these two and close the bracket. So obviously, right now it still gives me 265 because there are no holidays mentioned. Let's say the 1st of Jan 2023 was a holiday. So I'm going to type 1st Jan 2023. Look here on the left, 265 net working days. The moment I press enter, see what happens. It didn't take it. Why? Okay, one more. Let's give 5/1/2023. You saw how the dates changed? Okay. Now remember one thing here. Do you know why this happened? Let me check before I answer that. Yeah. Here, if I remove this date, 5, and if I remove this, the date was 265. But the moment I typed 1st of Jan 2023, nothing happened. You know why? Because if you look at the calendar, 1st Jan was a Sunday. So it already deducted that. Had I changed this to 2/1, that is 2nd of Jan 2023, it will reduce rather. So if you type a date which is a Saturday or Sunday, obviously nothing will happen. If you type any other day which is not a Saturday or Sunday, then this will be reduced further. So depending upon the number of holidays you provide, it will remove that. Now you may have a question. I'm sure some of you will have that question. What if a particular company does not have Saturday and Sunday as a weekend? They either have, let's say, just Sunday as a weekend, that is 6 working days a week, or they have different days for weekends. For example, this happens very frequently, or it's very common in BPOs and KPOs where you have alternate work offs or something like that. So, for example, a Sunday and a Monday, then how can you handle it? For that, we can't use network days because there is no other option. If you double click on it, there's no option which lets you specify the weekdays. For this, we have to use another function which is called networkdays.intl. Okay, so what I will do is I will delete this. I will start typing network days. Instead of the first function, I'll select the second one. Okay, start date. Let's take the same start date. Let's take the end date. There's no two things about that. Here, there is a 4th argument, which is called the weekend. So Excel lets you specify the days which are the weekends. Okay, so here you can choose what date you want. If you want, let's say Saturday, Sunday, you can choose that. If you want Sunday, Monday, you can choose that. And then the holidays. The holidays we already covered, so it's pretty simple. Now, you have two options to configure weekends. The first option is to supply a number as shown in the range here. I've shown it to you. Yeah. So first is Saturday, Sunday off. 5th is Wednesday, Thursday off. So if I type equal to network.intl start date, end date, and this is the weekend parameter. So you can either type the number. So if I select, let's say Friday, Saturday, it'll type 7, which is Friday, Saturday. Yeah, that is one option. The other option is using zeros and ones. This is very interesting. So let me explain it. Okay. Let's see here. Now you see there are 7 days in a week. So if all of them are zeros, that means there are no weekends. If Saturday and Sunday is a weekend, so the last two zeros become 1 and 1. If Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is a weekend, so the first one becomes a 1, the third one becomes a 1, and so on. This one becomes a 1. Okay, so this is the second option to provide a string of 7 characters in length consisting of zeros and ones. Yeah, so remember, 1 means weekend and 0 means workday. Okay, this is done. Now let's find the net working days using this. Till now we were just explaining it. Now let's actually try and find it. Start date, comma, end date, comma. Let's say we choose 11, Sunday only. Okay, you can do that. We have only specified that there is Sunday. So if you close it and if you press enter, it'll give you total 318 net working days. Okay, which is obviously greater than 260 something, which was there earlier. Similarly, you can also, instead of typing, let's say 11, you can also type. So what was 11 for? 11 was for Sunday, right? So if I type again, comma, 11 is for Sunday only. Now, if I want to use the second option, how do I do it? That is zeros and ones. So I'll type comma, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. And if you press enter, we'll get the same value. So you can use any of the options that you like. Obviously, it is easier to just do comma and select the list. The next important function that we will cover is the date function. Okay. Now, the Excel date function helps you create a valid date from individual arguments like year, month, or day. Now, you may ask, why do I need a date function? We can always type the date directly in the cell. It is a valid question. If you remember, we covered so many functions in the past videos, for example, sum product, sum if, count ifs, etc., etc., where we provided different criteria. Now, imagine if you had to find specific values with a criteria less than equal to a specific date. So how will you pass that date? To explain what I mean, let's go to sheet 3. Now in this sheet 3, we have a publisher sample data. Let's say I want to count the publishers where the date is more than 15th of Jan. So I've highlighted some of these dates, 15th of Jan 2023. So I've highlighted these are the 4 dates which are greater than 15th of Jan 2023. Okay, so if I type, if you remember the COUNTIF formula, D3 to D17, okay, comma, sorry. And then if you type greater than, and if you type 15/01/2023, see what happens. It worked and it gave you 3. What is wrong with this method? The problem is it worked because my system's date format is DDMMYYYY. If my dates format was MMDDYYYY, then it wouldn't have worked. For example, if I change this formula to 1st of 15th, 2023, yeah, if I change it to this, it'll give me 0. It didn't work. It should have worked, right? Because the date that I supplied looks like a valid date. There are many more scenarios where date is part of another function, and this is where the date function plays an important role. Before we use a date function in the COUNTIF formula, let me show you how date function works. So 15th of Jan 2023 can be written as, okay, is equal to date and the start bracket. The syntax is year, comma, month, comma, day, where the year is the number of the year or a cell reference which contains the number of the year. Similarly, month is the number of month or a cell reference which contains the number for the month. And the last argument is day, which is number of day or a cell reference which contains the number of the day. So if I type 2023, which is the year, comma, month, which is Jan, comma, day is 15th, and if I close the bracket and if I press enter, I get 15th of Jan 2023. Now it doesn't matter what is the system date format, it will automatically convert this into a date, and this is what we can use in the COUNTIF's formula. The date function is the safest way to create a date in the Excel formula as compared to the text representation that we had here. Yeah, so there's no confusion. Simply use the date formula and your formula will work. So this can be written as ampersand this. It can be written as this, and this part can be replaced by this function. So copy this and replace this. Okay, and if you press enter, you will get 3. Now it doesn't matter whatever your date format is, it will always work. Now moving on, I will cover 3 Excel functions which will extract parts of a date. Okay, till now we were creating the date from year, month, and the date. Now I will share 3 Excel functions which will extract the year, the month, and the day from the date. Those 3 functions are year, month, and day. So if you go back here, year, month, and day, these are the 3 functions. Okay, so these are the 3 functions that I'm talking about. Right, the year function will return an integer value that is a 4-digit year corresponding to a specified date. So if I type equal to year and start bracket, and if I select this, I will get 2023. Similarly, you have month, start bracket, it is expecting a serial number. Obviously, like I said, date is stored as serial number, so it will accept a valid date, and it will give you 2. The third is day. If you start bracket, select the date, close, and you will get 20. So these 3 functions are very important, guys. If you later on when I show you different kind of functionalities, you have to use these functions to extract different parts of the date. Okay, so remember that. Now, an interesting question for you guys. Where do you think I can use the year function? Here I have used the year function. So like I said, we'll cover that later. Might as well do it now. Okay. So where do you think we can use this? I'll give you one example and you can think of others. If you have watched the previous video where I explained about conditional formatting, you remember there was a section where you can apply formulas to conditional formatting. That is where you can use a function like year. For example, I want to highlight the rows where the date is greater than 15th of Jan 2023. I want to, let's say, highlight the entire row. So how do I do that? Let me first remove all the colors here so that we can clearly see the formatting. Now our table is ready. Before I go ahead and I use a function in the conditional formatting, let me first explain the logic. What we want to do is we want to first extract the year from this data. Okay, so I will first demonstrate that with D3, which is this cell. Okay, so I will start typing here is equal to year, start bracket, and this date, close bracket. We get the year here. Now, if I want to compare it with 2023, how do I do it? However, I will not hardcode 2023. I want to extract the 2023 from today's date and then compare it. Okay, so what I will do is I'll type equal to year, start bracket, today. I already covered today. So year will give me 2023. This is easy. Finally, now I want to see whether these two are equal. So what I will do is equal to this is equal to this. So this is false. So these two dates are not equal. Now, H3 equal to I3 can also be written as, if I copy the formula from here, the reason why I'm doing this, guys, so that you understand how to construct a formula which you can use in the conditional formatting. So this is working fine. And then you will copy this from here, and then you will paste it here. Okay, so now we have a formula which compares the year from this date with the year from today. Very simple. Okay, now let's drag the formula down and see what do we get. I'm going to bring everything down. Now you will notice this is true. And this is true, this is true, and this is true. Yeah. So that means I want the true value in conditional formatting so that these rows get colored. Now let's apply this particular formula. I'm going to copy this so that I can use this. And then I'm going to select the range. I'll go to the home tab, conditional formatting, and then new rule. Okay. I will select user formula to determine which cell format. And then I'm going to paste the formula. So this is the formula that we created here. But we will do a small change to this formula. You see D3 here. So I'm going to change this D3 to $D3. Now, why am I doing this? So I've already, in one of my previous videos, I've already explained about absolute and relative reference. So why do I need to make this change? First of all, I've selected the entire range and I want the comparison to be restricted to column D only, because otherwise it'll start comparing the first column for the dates. So I made that absolute. I've not made 3 absolute because I want conditional formatting to evaluate each row individually. Okay, once that is done, once my formula is correct, now I will click on format. For demonstration purpose, let's color the entire row as orange. So I'm going to the fill tab and I'll select orange. Okay, once this is done, I will click on OK. And then I'll click on OK again. Do you see how it colored all the rows with orange? I've not done any other customization. This is a very basic example. So remember, this is how you use, if I go to conditional formatting, manage rules, if I do edit rule, see how I've used year. Similarly, you can use month or day function in different scenarios. So this is how these 3 functions are important. The next function that we will cover is EO month, which is end of month. This function helps to find the last day of the month after adding a specific number of months to a date. Okay, let's go to the next worksheet. So I've got some basic data here. Let's say the publisher's data is for publisher Nintendo, and here we have dates, and here we have total sales for a particular genre. And here, okay. Now, here I have a start date. Let's say I want to find the date which falls on the end of the month. Let me start typing and then I'll explain the syntax. Okay, so I'll type equal to end of month, which is EO month, and it is expecting a start date. So I will select this. Then the second argument is months. This is the number of months before or after the start date. A positive value means that you want to find the end of month ahead. Otherwise, a negative value means you want to find a month which is before, a date before. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select G4, which is 0. If I'm pressing 0, that means I'm telling do not add anything to the month. Find me the end of month of this current month of the start date. If I close it, if I press enter, it gives me 31st Jan 2023. Now, same formula I will type here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to now add 1, which is here. So I'm adding 1 month and then I want the date. If I press enter, it gives me 28 Feb. So after adding 1 month to this date, it gives me end of month. And if I want to drag it down, what I will do is I will make F4 absolute, and then I'll copy the formula down. So after adding 5 months, it gives me 30th of June 2023. Notice here, if I put -1, it gives me the last date, end of month date of the previous month because of -1. This is pretty simple. Okay. Now, as analyst, it is quite possible that you'll have to use end of month a lot. Now, let's see some practical examples where we can use end of month. Let's say I want to find the total sales in January in this cell. So I want to find the total sales in January. And okay, so now let's insert the formula here. So I'll start typing is equal to sum ifs, because I need to find the total sales, start bracket, and then this is the range, sum range, because I want the sum of total sales, comma. My criteria range now becomes the date range, which is this. And then I will type greater than equal to. Okay. Now notice I'm not going to use a text date. I'm going to actually use the date function, like I explained earlier. 1st Jan, close the bracket, comma. So what I'm doing is, let me explain the logic. If I want the total sales in Jan, so my start date would be what? 1st of Jan. And my last date would be 31st of Jan. So how will I get 31st of Jan without hard coding the value? I will have to use end of month. So this is how I use it. And then ampersand end of month and the start date. So again, start date, I will type date, start bracket, 1, date expects a year first, 2023, comma, 1, comma, 1. Okay, this is done, comma. How many months do I want to add? I don't want to add any months because I want the last date of this month. So I type 0 and I close the bracket. Okay, and then I close the bracket again. One moment, something is missing. Let me check. D4 to D19, C4 to C19 is perfect. This is fine. Ampersand date is fine, comma. Oh, yes. Again, we have to give the range because that's where the criteria is going to be added. And we get 5,12,417. Yeah, so this is how we find the total sales. Similarly, if I want to find the total sales in the first quarter, I can also do that. Now, how do I do that? So I'm going to copy the same formula here and I'll paste it here. Okay. Now, if you remember, I said first quarter. So first quarter has how many months? 3 months. So all I have to do is instead of 0, I'll have to add 2 months to it. So I get 3 months. And if I press enter, I will get the value for the first quarter. Had I chosen third quarter, then my start date would not have been 1st of Jan 2023. Then I would have used a different date. Or sorry, I could have, the other way I could have done is I would have still used 1st of Jan this, and then I would have created a date to find the end of the quarter. It depends on how you do it. Now let's cover some time functions. There's one more date function, but I'll cover that later. If you remember, we covered the date function, which had 3 arguments: year, month, and day, correct? Similarly, we have a time function, which has 3 arguments: hour, minute, and second. So the next 4 functions that we will cover is time, hour, minute, and second. As I mentioned earlier, the time is stored as decimals. One important thing that I would like to tell you, which is true for both date and time, if the cell format is general, if you click on any cell, and if you right click on format cell, you will notice that the format is general. So if the format is general, before the function is entered, the result is formatted as date or time. If it is formatted as number, then if you put a date formula or a time formula, then you will get a number or a decimal. So remember this part. Now the time function returns the decimal number of a particular time, and the decimal number which is returned is a value which ranges from 0 to 0.9998846. So if you noticed how I was using 0.5, so that's what it is. We will be talking about this. This represents the time which starts from 12 a.m., which is 12 in the night, till 11 p.m., 59 minutes and 59 seconds in the night. 12 a.m. in the morning, if you can say that. Yeah. Just like the date function, the syntax of time function is very similar. Okay, so should I do it here? Yeah, let's do it here. Go to sheet 5. I have some sample data here. So if you type equal to time, start bracket, you will notice it is expecting hour, minute, and second, just like the date function. This is very simple, guys. So hour requires a number from 0 to 32767. It represents the hour. Any value which is greater than 23 will be divided by 24. And the remainder will be treated as the hour value. For example, okay, if I type 29, okay, before I type 29, if I type 23, hour, minute as, let's say, 5, and second as 5. If I close the bracket and if I press enter, it shows me 11.5. See, 11.5.5. Now, obviously, this is not showing seconds because the date is not formatted as seconds. But if you format it as seconds, you can also see as seconds. Now, what if I change this 23 to, let's say, 29? Okay, and let's make this 0 for easy understanding. So in one day, there are 24 hours. So if I put 29, how Excel will interpret it? The moment I press enter, it gives me 5 a.m. But here it is 29. How did it evaluate to 5 a.m.? How did it do that? So what happens? The time function returns a decimal value. And that decimal value, once it subtracts from, let's say, so let's take it as 23. We have 23 and then we have 29. So the difference between this is 24 is midnight. Then you have 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. So this is 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2, 3, 4, and this is 5. And that is why it is 5 a.m. So after 24, it resets. After 23, it resets to 24, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how it calculated this. Remember this. This is very crucial when you are dealing with time. Okay, so you can also, instead of numbers, you can also specify cell addresses like this. Yeah, right now, cells are empty, so the value is 0. And hence, time is showing as 12 a.m. since all the three are 0. Now, if you want, you can specify the numbers here and it will also give you that. But before we do that, now the next three functions that we are covering is hour, minute, and second. Let's say if I want to get the hour part, like the way we did it in a date, the year, month, and a day. Similarly, you can do for the hour, minute, and second. Okay, so if I type hour and let's select D5. Okay, and if I close this, I get 9 because it pulled up the 9, which is the hour in the time. So the moment this was returned, this also got updated. Now the minute is equal to minute start bracket, this close bracket, and this got updated. Similarly, second start bracket, and if you select this and if you close this, you get 23 seconds. Obviously, let's do one thing. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. So now you can see the seconds as well. So whatever you type here will get updated in the time function. So time is calculated. You can also supply hour, minute, and second in time, or the reverse. You can extract the hour, the minute, and the second from a particular time. So remember these three functions. Okay. Now, again, you can use the hour, minute, and second in a lot of Excel functions like we did for year in conditional formatting. Okay. Moving on to the last two functions of the day, which are date value and time value. So this is again very important, guys. This is something which a lot of websites do not explain. So let me take you through this, and then you will understand why it can be dangerous, or rather you can get unexpected results if you do not use these functions correctly. Okay, when you're doing any kind of analysis, whether it is data analysis or financial analysis, we need to import a lot of files from different sources. The date value function can help us when we are importing such files, especially if the date stored in those files are in text format. I'm sure you must have imported a lot of files, and you must have suddenly seen that the date is slightly aligned towards the left rather than the right. So it's a clear indication that it is a text format. The date value function, it converts the dates stored in text format to a proper date format. Now, if you look at this small range, okay, here the dates I have formatted if you click on this cell, I have formatted it as text so that I can store these dates as text. So the dates have been stored as text. Okay. Now let's try and use the date value function on these dates. Notice the visual format of the first date is month, date, and the year. 02 is the month, then the date and the year. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit so that you can see it clearly. And in the second, it is date, month, and year. Now, if you look at these two dates, if you did not know your system format, you would not know what format this date is. It could be month, date, year, or date, month, year. Okay, the last format is obviously clear. It is date, month, and then year. So let's start typing. Okay, so I'll type equal to date value, start bracket. Now the argument is date text. It is expecting a date as an Excel date format. Now I said Excel date format. What does it mean? Okay, let me do a small experiment, and then you'll understand what I mean. Okay, so I'll type equal to date value, start bracket, and I'll select this and close the bracket, and I'll press the enter key, and I get the value error. Okay, I will explain this error in a moment. Let's copy the formula down. So it got converted to number, and this is an error here. Okay, not a problem. Now let's understand what are the dates it represents. So if you remember in the previous video, I showed how to use the text function. Okay, so let's use the text function is equal to text, start bracket, this cell, comma, dd dash mmm dash yyyy. I'm using an extra m so that you get the name of the month. And I press the enter key. Obviously, the first cell will give an error because this is an error. Let's copy the formula down. So the dates are 20th Feb, fine. This is 2nd of March, and this is 3rd of Feb, and this is 3rd of March. Okay, so this is the reason why I did it, so that you can see it. Now coming back to this cell, here, why did we get an error? Because my system date format is date, month, and year. If you look at this, because of this, Excel is not able to parse this date because there is no month which is 20. The maximum is 12. In 1 year, there are 12 months. So how do I convert this date to a text date to a proper date? For this, we can use 3 text functions which I covered in the first video, which is left, mid, right. We can cover these 3 functions. We use these 3 functions with the date. Okay, so what I will do is, let's do here. Okay, and I will type equal to left, start bracket. Okay, this is an error, so let's do it here only. Left, start bracket, this date, comma. Now I need 2. So let's type 2, close bracket, and I get 02. Okay, similarly, I can type equal to mid, start bracket, select this cell. Now I want to extract from the 4th position, 0, so 1, 2, 3, and the 4th position. So I'll type 4, comma, and I want to extract 2 characters. So I get 20, perfect. And to retrieve 2023, I'll use the right function. And I get this, comma, 4. So I get the date, the month, and the year. Okay. Now I can use is equal to, I'll do it here, date, start bracket. It is expecting a year, so you select this. Then it is expecting a month, which is this, and then this date. And you get your date. So remember, in such scenarios, always use the correct functions. Now here I used left, mid, and right. You can copy this one by one and you can replace it. Okay, and it will work. Oh, sorry, I pasted the wrong one. So right will go in the year part, which is this. And if I press the enter key, see, it still works. So you can always replace this by the mid function and this by the left function, and you'll get the date, which is very important. Now, there's an interesting thing that I want to explain, but I will not do it in this video. I'll do it in the next video as it involves a logical function. And in the next video, when I'm talking about the logical functions, I'll give you very complex scenarios. Whatever functions we covered till date, we will use it there. Okay, I'll give you a basic gist. So what I want to achieve is here I have a log time, log in and log out time, correct? If I want to find the difference between the time, then how will I do it? So you may say, okay, Sid, just do this minus this. Yeah, it gives you the time, right? Fair enough. Yes, it gives me the time. But if I copy the formula down, what happens? The last one gave me an error. Why? Why did give me an error? Because the second time is beyond midnight. It goes into the next date. And the moment I subtract this by this, it gives me a negative value. And like I said, Excel is not able to handle a negative value. So how do we solve this? And this is where I'm going to show you a very amazing way to handle this. So do watch the next video. Moving on, just like we have the date value function, we also can use the time value function to convert a time which is stored as text to Microsoft Excel time. I keep on stressing Microsoft Excel time because Excel reads dates and time differently than others. Now, this function can help you when you're importing data which has a date and time. Okay, so here I've got some time values which are stored as text. Okay, now notice carefully how I have typed all these, and you'll understand why I did that. Okay, the first one has a dot, the second one has 2 dots instead of colon, and similarly there are other dates which are colon, and this one has date and the time. This is the 24-hour format, and this is the normal format. Okay, let's start typing. So if I type equal to time value, okay, and if I select this and if I press the enter key, I get an error. Okay, fair enough. We'll come to this in a moment. I'll explain why we are getting an error. But remember, the time text is again an argument which you have to supply, which is the time stored as text. Okay, and just like we did it for the date here, we'll do the time as well for the time using the text function. Start bracket is comma, and let's convert it to HHMMSS. Obviously, we are going to get an error because this is also an error. Let's copy the formula down. So we converted this to decimals, and then we converted it back to time using these decimals using the text function. Now, let's understand why did we get an error here. We got an error because this argument, time text, okay, this expects a text string that represents a time, and in the text string, we need to separate the hours, minutes, and seconds by colon. You cannot have dots or any other separators. Okay, it has to be done by colon. So how do we extract the time from this? So if you remember, if you've seen the previous video, we can use a function which is called substitute. So if I say equal to substitute text, which is this, yeah, this is the text where we want to replace. What is the old text? The old text is dot, and we have to replace it with colon. And if we close this and if we press enter, we get 2 p.m. It replaced the dot with colon. Now we can pass this value to a time value function. So what I will do is I will copy this from here, and inside this time value, I'll replace B18 by this. See? And if I copy this down, it did this as well. Very simple, guys. Remember, time value expects, like the date value, it expects date and time as string. And in case of time value, the time should be separated by colon. A lot of times you will see in the imported data, dots have been used. So don't get worried. Simply use time value with substitute, replace dots with colon, and you will be good to go. So let's go back to sheet 1. So these are the 16 functions that we covered. Actually 17 if you consider this also as a function, but obviously I just counted this as 1. So we covered total 17 functions today. As usual,